So first of all, I'd like to welcome you all, and I will just a brief introduction. We'll start with Professor Russell Belk, and I will just introduce this session. Professor Russell Belk is a distinguished research professor and the Kraft Food Canada Chair in Marketing at Schulich School of Business. I could just paraphrase what my dear friend Letícia Cazotte elegantly said once at Copiade. Russ Belk is Russ Belk, which simply but so clearly express his status as leading authority on marketing fields. Instead of describing his academic production and impact in our field, near 600 manuscripts, amazing, and awarded receiving during his career, I prefer to highlight the joy of sharing research work with him. Many of us in this audience had the opportunity to learn with Russ' careful attention. He always listened attentively, extend words of enthusiasm and motivation to progress our research. In these interactions, more than improve ourselves as research, we have the gift of his inspiration to evolve as human beings. Because of this open and generous spirit, Russ remains engaged in advanced knowledge about people, cultures, and their relations with consumption. He continues to provide us with essential reflects on this complex topic as related to technologies, as we will discuss in this roundtable. It is with this spirit of generosity that Russ participates in this roundtable today. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. We will share this discussion with Marianne Humayou, who is Assistant Professor at Telfair School of Management, and Vito Nima, postdoctoral fellow at Schulich School of Business, both talent and young scholars that we will certainly read a lot in the coming years. Later, I will present a more detailed bio of Marianne and Vito, but for now, I just would like to say thank you all and invite Russ to begin our roundtable on the perils and rewards and of research done on technocultural context.
Thank you very much, Maribel, for that lovely introduction. And I'm happy to be here in front of this distinguished audience. And I wish I were in Brazil with you once again, although not for the sake of COVID, just the beauty of Brazil. So 30 to 35 minutes, is that right, Maribel?
Yes,
is that what you said?
yes,
okay.
Perfect.
Well, I don't know if you know, but if you give academics a certain amount of time, we will fill it up no matter what that time is. I don't have any PowerPoints, but I did think I would share sort of an outline of my talk. And so let me just see if this works. And so I think you can see that. I want to talk about rewards first, and then I have a much shorter list of perils because I believe there are many more rewards than there are perils. And I don't think I'm going to overlap too much with Vito or Miriam because I'm concentrating on a somewhat unique set of things that have worked for me. And I apologize to both of you if I do overlap. You know, we haven't coordinated this at all. But I guess the first observation, and an important one, is that in a high-tech world, everyone has a cell phone, and increasingly everyone has a smartphone. In Brazil, I saw a statistic that 68% of people now have smartphones, which is incredible. And it provides us with a unique research opportunity, which I'll get into in just a moment. Just to give some examples, with people having smartphones, it enables us to allow them to use their smartphones to help us do research. And so, for example, we could ping them and ask them to describe their environment or describe their moods, or if they're at a restaurant, what they've eaten, or how people are using their smartphones. Are they taking pictures of their food, for example, and posting them? All of those are things that we couldn't have done. It's an immediacy that we didn't have. We don't have to be there with them. And sometimes when we're with them, we're like a fifth wheel, something that's unneeded. I have a couple of friends that have a research agency called Practica in New York and Chicago. And they had a contract one time to study how young college students, young university students spend their weekends. And particularly it was interested in alcohol consumption. And they knew that they could have paid people and forced them to allow them to come with them to go out drinking at the bars. But obviously that would be this sort of fifth wheel. They wouldn't really fit in. And so what they did is just have one of them take his smartphone and record his fellows, his buddies, what was happening. And that's not unusual because people just do that, especially college students. And so it fit right in. And what they learned was that early in the evening, the people ordered the expensive beers. And later in the evening, they ordered the inexpensive beers, not because they had run out of money, but because they could no longer appreciate the taste of good beers at that point. And that's something that they, once again, probably could not have figured out without them using their smartphones and taking advantage of that. So that's one way. We could also have them photograph something that we assign them. So we could assign them to go through an entire day and record before they eat it, their meals, and maybe to talk about the things that are on their plate. Or we could say, take an outside view of your home, someone that's coming to visit you, what would they see first? What would they see next? And so forth. And in that way, we learn something about a specific topic that interests us. In this case, the environment, the sort of home setup, and how you get to their rooms. Do you have to walk upstairs? Do you go up in an elevator? And so forth. So that would be one way that we could take advantage by having them take images on their smartphones and send them to us instantly. And because they're sending them to us, we could send them questions about them. Where is this? What direction are you facing? Did you order anything after this for dessert? Did you order any alcohol with the meal? All of those sorts of things. So what are you having with your feijoada and so forth? These are things that we could not only observe and have them report, but we could query them about. Another type of thing that we could query them about would be to take one of these photos that they have sent us and to do visual elicitation with it. That is, we show it to them and have them tell us about it. This is also sometimes called auto-driving. This is back the example that I'll give you in pre-digital era. And I was doing research with a colleague, Kelly Tian, and we were interested in studying people's office place possessions. What things did they bring to the office and how did that differ from the home? And so, as I said, this was in the olden days. So we sent them a disposable camera and had them take a dozen photos of things that meant something to us. And then they sent this disposable camera back to us. We had the film developed. I'm laughing at how old-fashioned this is and must seem to many of you. But we then developed the film, as I said, and we brought back the photos. And we interviewed them in a restaurant that was near the office place, but it wasn't at the office place as such. And so in using this sort of technique of auto-driving, visual elicitation, we're able to get them to point out things to us and to explain what these things mean. And so, for example, we were doing this research at a corporation that was able to transmit bank data through a satellite very securely without worrying about anyone getting a hold of it. And it was a startup, and all of these people were working very hard because they were anticipating that there was going to be an IPO or a buyout, and they would all become fabulously wealthy. And so one of the things that motivated them was connected to one of the photos that a man took of his desk. And the photos over his desk were of boats, big, long speed boats. And these were literally his dream boats. These were the things that he was going to buy when he became wealthy after this buyout or IPO. And so that was what motivated him and kept him going. There was another woman who had a collection on her desk that she'd photographed of Pez containers. I don't know if you know these, but it's a breath mint, and you take them out one at a time from this little cylinder, And the head of it is the head of a clown or a person that you know, a Donald Trump or a Donald Duck or whatever it might be. And so she had a couple of these on her desk, and other people noticed it and started bringing some in and adding to it. It became a collection and sort of an object of workplace humor. And workplace humor can be a motivating factor. I did a study for an American Express regional office at one point, and they were at the end of a fiscal year, and it was the American Halloween celebration that was coming up. And so they told people, the employee, the president was a female, she told people that, look, you can take the day off, but you have to come to work, and you can come to work in costume, and you can decorate your workplace, and we would like to set up some time in the middle of the day when you do skits. And so little plays that they did. And it turned out this was also a fun and a humorous sort of thing. They did skits about mocking the boss and mocking the workplace. And after that, the productivity of this unit just shot up. There were many Federal Express offices around the world, but this one did very well. And so others, the next year, other corporate offices around the country and around the world began to do the same thing. And even the board of directors that was meeting in Cairo, Egypt that year. And so they had found, like the Pez containers, a way to take advantage of humor in the workplace. And that wasn't their initial intent. They were just trying to reward the employees. But visual photographs of this thing, which everyone was taking, were an important part of that research as well. Another example would be to use certain apps to trace the trails of people. Some people that published in a book I was editing at one time followed people on the ski slopes. And where did they go during the day? Which runs did they take? At what time of day? Where did they go in the resort city and so forth? And of course, you can do the same thing in a supermarket or the entire resort location. Everything that you might want to know geographically about a particular place. There are apps that make that very easy. And basically, we can ping people's phones to find that out. And everyone carries their phones with them, so that's very easy. Another enabling device or way that we use people's phones is to conduct online group interviews or focus groups, if you like, and then video record those with Skype or Zoom interviews. We did this recently under COVID-19 in doing interviews in India. And initially we had done this research live and going to people's homes. And I worked with a couple of good Indian colleagues, and they were they spoke Indian languages, which I did not. So many of the interviews were in English, but when it got to be in Hindi, they had to take over. But they did some really clever things. Tanuka Ghoshal is the woman that I work most closely with. And what they did was they had a little cutout paper doll, and we were interested in fashions, among other things. And they had this task called Dress Lakshmi, and the name of the doll was Lakshmi, who's also an Indian goddess of wealth. But they had a number of clothes. This is like an old paper doll, if any of you remember those from childhood, that you would put different clothes on. But they also brought samples of various fabrics so that they could touch them and feel them and so forth. And they said, well, suppose she was going to a wedding. How would you dress her then? So what about her children? They didn't have models for, but they just talked about it. How would you dress your children on different occasions? And so in that case, we used a number of visual techniques. And when COVID-19 came, we had to do this on the phone or really via Zoom. And Tanuka and I were sort of in the background, and we'd hired a researcher who was a very good qualitative researcher to actually do the interviews and arrange them and qualify the participants and so forth. And so she was doing the interviews, and we couldn't do the Dress Lakshmi, but we had a sample of outfits, and she showed the outfits to them one at a time and talked about whether they would wear them at all, and if so, on what occasions. And as I said, Tanuka and I were in the background. We were blacked out. But after the completion of the interview, and actually later on, we jumped in at a couple of points, we followed up with some questions that we wanted to determine more about that they talked about, but we'd like more detail. Now, there were some things that we had done in situ, in the person's home, that we couldn't do, at least very well, on Zoom or Skype. And that included, there was an app on smartphones to, I guess I should have explained the hypothesis. We were interested based on some observations that the researchers in India had done initially, that poor people would prefer brighter colors, louder sounds, spicier foods, stronger drinks, more sugar in their drinks and tea and so forth. Basically, in each sensory mode, more of it. And without going into detail about the hypotheses, it was for that reason that we looked at the decibel levels on the ringtones on their smartphones and on their television when they turned it on to see if they listened at louder levels. We measured how many spoonfuls of sugar they put into the tea that they were serving us, how many chilies they put into their food, and so forth. So we were able to measure some of these other things as well. So we lost a little bit in trying to do this via smartphones, but we also had the opportunity for the researchers to jump into a greater degree than would have been comfortable, at least face to face. So those are some enabling things based on smartphones. I guess in the last one, I was getting into the smartphones of the researchers, but the others are all on the smartphones of the consumers and the participants that we're studying. We don't think much about it anymore, but we as researchers use our technology in the field to a great degree as well. And I'm going to try to hurry up a little bit because I think I'm already running close to running out of time. But we use our smartphones or tablet computers as voice recorders, as still cameras, as video cameras, decibel recorders, as I indicated, and display devices for visual elicitation. We can record field notes, we can code data, including we can code audio, photo, and video right on the recording without transcribing. And if we do transcribe, we can use auto-translate and auto-transcribe. We could even use auto code, although I don't like it, on things like In Vivo and Atlas TI. We could look at a concordance of how many times each word was said in all of the interviews. We could tag the photos. We can translate text. We can code visual signs. We could point the phone with Google Translate at signs and menus, and it will translate them for us instantly. I was in Berlin a year ago. Now it's a year and a half ago, and I didn't speak any Portuguese, and met a couple that didn't speak any English. And we went out to an island. We met on the ferry going out there, and we hung out for a week, and we conversed solely via Google Translate, going back and forth. You can do it with audio or have it print out the words. So that's a variety of things. We can also use GPS to find things, to mark our location. With LiDAR, we can have people do augmented reality and see how something looks in their home, or how cosmetics would look on their face for that matter. And we can use this LiDAR, which is now on several Apple devices, to measure distance and height. It's on the latest iTablet. What am I thinking of? You know what I mean, the Apple tablet, which is called whatever. Okay, so those are some things. I mentioned the augmented reality. With tablets, you can do these things, and you can also allow participants to construct a collage using images that they pull from the web. And this can be very enlightening as well as entertaining. And we don't tell them at the time, but afterwards we auto drive them and ask them, tell me about the things in this collage, and why did you do these things to represent travel? What does that mean? Is this a business trip, or is this a recreational leisure trip, and so forth? As researchers, assuming there are multiple researchers, we can instantly memo other researchers in the team, hey, ask about X, watch out for Y, try projective technique Z or Z, and so forth. We can use camcorders to document observation context. We did a study in New Orleans, Treme area. We happened to be there for the first Treme festival. This was an part of New Orleans hard hit by Hurricane Katrina. Without getting into that, it was very useful. We can conduct, I'll just go to the bottom because I'm getting there. We can conduct ethnographies online. We don't have to do that during a research data collection with consumers, but we can do it at our leisure. We can conduct literature reviews largely online. We can write up and share drafts of our papers with, again, multiple researchers online. And we can shoot and edit video and sound to produce a video that you can put into the ACR Film Festival. It's actually called the Video Track now, and put up online afterwards in an area called Films by Consumer Researchers, and then use it in classes or have other people do that and so forth. And just quickly, perils, what are the dangers here? Well, whenever you rely on technology, it can go wrong and you can lose data. And if you've had this happen, and many of us have, you know how devastating that can be. So back up everything as soon as possible, bring a backup recording device. Devices fail. Be careful not to accidentally record over or delete something. You're probably all suffering right now, including this conference, perhaps, from participant or researcher or conference goer Zoom fatigue. And so, you know, people can get tired of doing online interviews with Zoom, for example, as either researchers or participants. With poorer people and younger people, some of this may not be feasible. And I'm thinking of pre-literate people, for example, but even their projectives will work, and we can use our tablet to help do that as well. Also, video quality, especially if we have the participants shoot video for us, if we're thinking of using that in making a video to participate or to present rather to other people. Without a stabilizing stick, it can be really shaky cam, even with built-in camera recording stabilizers. So be sure to try to get people to do something to help that situation, or help it, if we're using it, help ourselves. And finally, there are other perils, but these are the main ones. Audio quality with smartphones can be really bad. If you're thinking of either transcribing or using this in a video, be sure to get the microphone off the camcorder. So use a lavalier mic or at least a shotgun mic to get better video quality. And so, sorry to rush through those last ones, but you can see there's many more advantages and rewards as opposed to perils here. So I'll take the perils off the screen. And so these are a quick rundown, and thank you for listening, and I'll now turn it back over to Maribel.
Thank you so much, Russ. It's interesting to see your passion for field research, knowing this reflection, how technology support us in doing research. Thank you so much. So I will present Marian, and then we will also have Vito, and we start the Q&A session. So I must say that's an honor and a pleasure to introduce Marian to Brazilian audience. Dr. Marian Humayun is Assistant Professor of Marketing at Telfair School of Management, University of Ottawa. Her research interests focus on the intersection of consumer culture, technology, branding, and social media, particularly in the context of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, consumer privacy, open source, maker culture, and digital detoxing. She completed her PhD at Schulich School of Business, York University, in 2019 under the supervision of Dr. Russell Belk. Her dissertation is a longitudinal ethnographic and ethnographic study of the Bitcoin and blockchain ecosystem since 2014, and how it has evolved as a decentralized brand through multiple crises. For her dissertation, she conducted fieldwork in Toronto, San Francisco, Miami, Berlin, Amsterdam, New York, Prague, Cancun, Cambridge, Boston, Zurich, and Tokyo at various Bitcoin blockchain events and conferences. For her master thesis at Durham University, she examined consumers seeking privacy and turned towards analog technologies such as paper notebooks, Moleskine, and film cameras, like and paintings, to escape the banality of digital realm and how certain brands myth of avenues of escapes. Her research has been published in Journal of Market Management and Journal of Macro Marketing. Marianne's work supported by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. You're welcome, Marianne.
Thank you so much for having me and for the invitation. And I think the less known you are, the longer the introduction needs to be. I feel like, you have to aspire to be like Russ, where like you just announce the name and like everybody knows who he is. It's such an honor to be here with all of you. And I hope that I get to meet everyone like in person at, different conferences. It's interesting that Russ has like a long list of rewards, which is good because like I think I have a longer list of perils, and it's good that we didn't really coordinate this thing either. Let me see if I can share my screen. Will this work? Am I sharing my screen or nope? Does anyone see my screen?
Yes, but it's white.
Oh.
Yeah. Yes.
There you go. Okay. I know what to do now.
Yes.
Okay, so this seems to work. So the prompt that we got was always plugged in, the perils of doing research in technocultures. And Maribel has already sort of talked about like what my research interests are. So I would say my research interests sort of stretch from the extremely digital, where we're sort of thinking about people who are, creating things in the blockchain ecosystem or people who are using cryptocurrencies. That's like the extremely digital part of things. And then I've also been interested in the more analog, sort of this post-digital, people who feel sort of tired of being online all the time. And that is something that has become even more widespread after, COVID and how it's digitized a lot of our lives. So peril number one would be change of doing research in technocultures. Like things change a lot. And one of the things that I have seen in my own research is when I started researching Bitcoin in 2014, like it had a more stigmatized, it was constantly dying all the time. And it is still actually, dying in the public imagination. Like right now it's being linked to climate change and all of those things. So that debate is going on. But like you can see even in these two different images, like this was the image on the left of your screen is the one that you would see in 2014, where it would be like a death angel. And then in 2020, it was basically, Bitcoin being just juxtaposed with like Queen Elizabeth or the US dollar. And so there's been like a very, very widespread change. And so that's one of the biggest perils. It's like things change fast. But then again, things can also change for the good in some ways, because when Russ and I were working on the analog paper that, we were sort of looking at how people were trying to go more post-digital. And so at that time, the 2020, this documentary was not out. So the cultural zeitgeist has sort of changed to where people are sort of reevaluating their relationship with technology. People are reevaluating how they interact with social media, and there's a lot more acceptance for the idea that yes, you might be monetized the whole time. And it is also interesting to see how both of my interest in Bitcoin and this privacy sort of thing is interconnected, because it is sort of coming from this critique of there's too much centralization, there's too much data that is controlled by a lot of these organizations, and maybe we need to aspire for like a better world that we need to create. And so, you know, the post-digital idea is basically we will remain very much digital, but it is this idea that, okay, maybe we need to reevaluate where we're going with things. Peril number 2, your ethnographic, if you are doing ethnographic research in, you know, technocultures, it can change at different times. Like back in the day, it was easier to access people who were in Bitcoin. Now it has become a lot more difficult. And it's one of those things that Russ sort of mentioned as well, like how you can maybe have access to people who are not as wealthy, but then, you know, when you're trying to do interviews, if somebody's very wealthy or somebody's a billionaire, obviously they're not really going to take out time for you. And so I think for me, ethnographic access changing has been another thing. One more peril would be that your context does not leave you. For example, if you are on, you know, if you're looking at Reddit, if you're looking at Twitter, there needs to be, and I've felt this as well, because like there's so much more new data that's being created every single day that you don't always know what's a good stopping point. And I think Russ has often told me to like stop and like, you know, just focus on writing papers. And so that becomes a bit of a problem as well. Like, where do you stop collecting data? Where do you say, how do you define that saturation point as well? And I think with COVID, one of the things that happened is like back in the day, it used to be that, okay, you know, you can go and attend a meetup event, or you can go and attend a conference, and that's like a 3-day, 4-day immersion. But then you get that distance and you can get out of the field, right? But with COVID, one of the things that has happened is since everything is online, there's just no stopping point. It's like 24/7. It's a bit like the news cycles that we're dealing with, you know, where there's like 24/7 news. And so your data also becomes this 24/7 sort of a cycle. Another issue is moving targets. For example, when I started researching Bitcoin, one of the things that was clear in the early days was there were some platforms that the sub-communities were operating in. So you could have, you know, the Reddit Bitcoin Talk org, or you could have the subreddits were there, and then there was Twitter became a more like 2016 onwards, it became more so a place where people were gathering. And so the platforms on which you're studying people are also changing. And it can also be a generational thing as well, because like now there are conversations that are happening on Clubhouse. And so you have to sort of keep track, and especially with ethnography, you have to keep track of like, where are the conversations shifting? And then you also have to, in some ways, ignore the buzzwords, because the buzzwords are there during hype cycles. And so you have to, you know, sort of focus on like what you're passionate about, or what's actually interesting to you, I think. And so that would be another thing. Peril number 5, rejections. You will encounter reviewer C or reviewer A in this case, where they might not understand the context that you're talking about. For Bitcoin, that has definitely changed a little bit, but you know, you will still probably encounter reviewer C. Rewards. One of the things that I will say is, I think for me with researching Bitcoin, I think it goes back to early nostalgia with like the early internet. It goes back to my fascination with Eliza as well, because I used to talk to Eliza. I thought it was a real person. I wasn't a very smart person, so which is why I thought it was like a real human being. And then I discovered the internet. And so, you know, I was talking to strangers on Craigslist. Thank God there weren't web cameras around then. But it was basically this sort of idea of being able to connect with people on the internet without having them see who I was, and without having these like racial, all of those boundaries that we sometimes have. And so I think what I was chasing after were these, where do we make authentic connections with others? Like that's something that was fascinating to me. And so when I came across Bitcoin, I sort of saw this space where there were people who were passionate. And I think like if I had come across Bitcoin right now, I would have probably not have found it as interesting as it was back then, simply because like right now, all the discussion is so much about money and it's about greed. So, you know, so you have to sort of figure out, like, I think that would be a big reward. Like if you can find a passionate community that you're interested in and that connects to your own past in some ways, it can be, you know, pretty good. And then it allows you to expand the boundaries of your own mind. And I think Russ helps do that quite a bit because he stretches your mind, right? Like with the questions that he's asking you to stretch your like mind's boundaries a little bit. And the best reward, obviously, is getting a chance to work with Russ. And one of the things that he has always said has been, do what's interesting to you and, you know, be theoretically promiscuous. And then I also really like this quote by Sherry Turkle. Like she basically said, if you relish your work, you will not have a disappointing career. When failures come, you know, you still love the work that you do. And so I think like that would be sort of my rewards and you know, the perils, I guess. And yeah, over to you. That was pretty much it for me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Marion. So I on the Q&A questions, I really would like to continue to discuss this idea of obsolescence. I mean, change, how it changed fast and how it's a quite interesting topic on your presentation. And I think we can go deeper on it. So now it's time to introduce Vito Nima. Vito Nima, I don't know if I should introduce or Luis Pessoa should introduce because he was his Brazilian supervisionary.
No,
But
Maribel, please. You're in charge here, please.
Vito Nima is a postdoctoral fellow in market at Schulich School of Business, York University, and an incoming assistant professor at Audencia Business School. His research interests include emerging and speculative technologies, primarily focus on transhumanism, cyborgs, biohacking, robots, and artificial intelligence. He is one of the finalists of 2021 AMS Mary Kay Doctoral Dissertation Award. Thank you so much, Vitor, for participating on our roundtable.
I thank you for your kindness in having me here. It's a huge opportunity, and I'm super, super, super honored to be here with you today. Thanks so much. So, the question is, what should I add after Russ and Marian? I have no idea, but I do my best here.
You have a lot to add. I had the joy to participate on your committee, on your dissertation committee. Yeah. And I'm sure you have a lot to add here.
All right. You're too kind. So let's go. My talk actually here is we are going to the extreme right now in terms of researching technology, right? And well, this is the type of my talk here for you today: transhumanism from sci-fi to sci-fact. So we're going to talk about a few challenges in researching this topic, or let's say this futuristic topic. And just to give you a little bit of background about transhumanism and introduce some terms and context, let's watch this short clip.
No, I'm not transsexual.
Oh.
Is that a word now?
But you said trans.
What did we call you then? I'm not transsexual. I'm transhuman.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, they keep changing the words. I don't know the difference. I don't want to change sex.
No, we said gender now, don't we?
I said I'm not comfortable with my body, so I want to get rid of it. This thing, all the arms and legs and every single bit of it. I don't want to be flesh. I'm really sorry, but I'm going to escape this thing and become digital.
What do you mean?
They say one day, soon, they'll have clinics in Switzerland where you can go and you'll sign a form and they'll take your brain and download it into the cloud. Recycled into the earth.
So you want to kill yourself?
I'm gonna live forever. As information, because that's what transhumans are, Mum. Not male or female, better. Where I'm going, there's no life or death, there's only data. I will be data.
usually one thing that is interesting to see is the audience faces right after this short clip, right? But anyway, Years and Years is one of the best pop culture manifestations that directly addresses transhumanism, which is a techno-progressive movement that proposes that we as human beings, as Homo sapiens, we are not at our final potential in terms of biological evolution, right? And actually, mind uploading is the most, let's say, extreme form of it. And that may sound like sci-fi plot, but anyway, big companies like Microsoft, Samsung, Facebook, Neuralink, Google have been working on transhumanist products and services, such as a type of mind cloning service. And well, these products actually they are fast becoming science fact, right? So here in the chat, I'm going to share something with you here. You can have a reference of a new Microsoft product about mind cloning. So this is not science fiction anymore, right? So it is fast becoming science fact. In any way, in a nutshell here, Bethany, the character, she's talking about her desire to actualize morphological freedom, which is an existentialist transhumanist principle. It basically says that we humans, we should pursue the right and the ability to change, to alter the human body at will through emerging and speculative technologies such as genetic engineering, brain-computer interfaces, cybernetic device implants, and the speculative mind uploading and so forth. And well, here's the thing, because when we take a look at prior consumer research, for instance, we find many and relevant studies focusing on technology consumption, but they mostly employed a sort of Heidegger's instrumental tool-oriented approach. And even in recent studies focusing on the role of technology shaping consumer identities, for instance, these technologies are portrayed and experienced as servants at the disposal of masters consumers in their daily activities. So these studies are about human technology interactions, and they are not about human technology integrations, as in the case here, as envisioned by transhumanism. And one thing that is of extremely importance here is that once you literally merge with technology, with a technological device, for example, you become a cyborg. And here I'm not talking about Donna Haraway's metaphorical post-human figure, but a human-machine symbiotic creature, a biological cyborg, or as Kleins and Klein originally proposed, a cybernetic organism that is enhanced because of the combinations of drugs, electronic data processing, and some sort of cybernetics. And this is a critical point when we are trying to understand cyborgs within marketing and consumer research. Transhumanism is about working on one's ontological condition through enhancement and will, whereas therapy has no connection with it. So any technologies used for healthcare purposes, for instance, like pacemakers, insulin pumps, or bionic limbs, they are not about, or they are not encompassed within this transhumanist perspective, right? They don't have any kind of connection with morphological freedom and transhumanism as an existential project. Just to give you an example here, within this context, we have grinders and the grinding subculture. So grinders are do-it-yourself cyborgs that upgrade their bodies with hardware, such as microchip implants, and regardless of any kind of governmental approval or regulation of cyborg products and services. And as you can see here in these images, these cyborgs, they can open doors without keys, they can purchase items without credit cards, store data inside the microchip, and exchange data between smartphones and their hands. And well, just to a brief mention here, the first image here is my hand, actually is the microchip outside my body. And the second image here is an X-ray of my left hand with my implant, with my microchip implant. So right now I'm gonna just switch cameras here to show you just a little bit what I'm talking about. So here you have the syringe to do the procedure, pretty thick, as you can see. And this is the microchip. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I think you can. It has the size of a rice, a grain of rice. And in my case, mine is right, I have a freckle here. Mine is right here, right? I'm not sure if you can see it. All right. Let's say that I want to use my microchip to replace my card to access my building. I just have to use this device here to clone the information and then transfer the information to my microchip. And now I don't need this card anymore to get into my building because I already have the information right here stored inside my hand with my microchip. And I can do the same, for instance, if I want to hack your iPhone, for instance, or hack your cell phone. So please stay away from my hand. I'm kidding, I'm joking. I would never do that. But in any way, it is a possibility, all right? And well, this is part of my autoethnography part of my doctoral dissertation. And now we may think just a little bit about why should we as marketing and consumer researchers care about that? Why should we study these topics? Once again, they may sound just a little bit like science fiction, but they are fast becoming science fact. Well, firstly, this is problematic for a number of reasons. The first one is, given cyborgs technologies forecast cost, a wide social gap actually between those enhanced and those unenhanced seems certain to be a thing, to be a reality. And the second thing here is that in trying to overcome several quotes right now, the unfinished, unstable, and incomplete human being condition, humanity may be, let's say, may reenact historical atrocities such as the Nazi eugenics experiments. And third, in becoming more machine object-like and less human subject-like, humanity may face a greater commodification, objectification of human life. And the last problem here is that from an existential perspective, once the human technology integration happens, well, is he or she still a human being for having these technology implanted into their bodies? What would be then the implications to the sense of self of these enhanced being? Right. One example here, just to make sure that you're getting it. Well, we have preliminary ethnographic data showing that becoming cyborgs or becoming a cyborg is not a problem when someone is recovering some human ability or trying to stay alive, as in the case of pacemakers and bionic limbs. Because Well, from the ethical, religious, and legal perspective, in this case, you are allowed to become machine-like human, to be human. And as a second example here, well, on the other hand, when someone without health issues try to become more, once again, more than human, quotes here, more than human, by merging with technology, as in the case of having a microchip, some people don't take it very well. And some people say that we as human beings should not defy God's plans, or that this is unethical behavior, or that you may lose rights as human beings, as a human being. And well, nothing in this case can be better or sacred than human beings. And if you try to do that, you must be punished. And I'm gonna share something, just a brief personal story here with you. 2 years ago, I was in Rio de Janeiro, Botafogo, with Luis Pessoa. We were having a beer, and there is this bar in Botafogo. I really don't remember the name of the bar, and you can pay for your beer by giving the waiter some sort of card that has an identification number that must be cloned, and then at the end of your dinner or anything like that, you're gonna pay because of the amount of beer that you were having. And the first thing that I've tried when I saw that machine, that device, was trying to pay with my microchip, and I was trying to tap my hand there, and the person was like, "Dude, what you doing?" And then, well, I don't live here. I'm here on vacation. I'm trying to pay stuff with using my microchip. I have one here. That's this, blah, 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 blah. And the person was like, no, that's not a thing. That's no. I was like, all right, fine. I gave them my Subway card to be cloned, and then to consume our beer. And well, at a certain point, a person came to our table and said, "Sir, please, could you explain to me once again what is that that you have in your hand?" I was like, yes. Oh, it is this, it is that, it works like that. And the person said, well, I'm super religious here, and this is some sort of mark of the beast, right? This is the reincarnation of the devil. Can you prove that you are not a devil? I said, yes, for sure. I am always carrying my rosary. I almost died when I was 10, and since then I carry my rosary. And I was like, you see, I'm holding my rosary here. I'm not burning my hand. I'm not a devil. I'm a nice person. So don't worry about that. Everything's gonna be all right. So that's right. That's all right. So once again, there's this idea, there's this cultural dimension, there is this religious dimension that somehow informs our perception and obviously our acceptance in terms of cyborg products and services. And well, because of this, I have been trying to organize these perceptions and narratives about transhumanism and cyborgization in a semiotic square, as you can see here. And well, what allows us humans to go from funky to freaky is our notion of human exceptionalism, which means that nothing can be better than us as a species, and anything that threatens this position is not welcomed. And this notion of human exceptionalism is rooted in three major dimensions. So biology/evolutionism, religion, and our legal system that supports, let's say, notions of personhood, for instance. So it is a bit complicated when it comes to Donna Haraway's, for instance, metaphorical cyborg and the transhuman biological cyborg. In many cases, well, if the cyborg is fictional, if it is a fantasy, well, this is fine. But if the cyborg is a reality, is something that is, real, then we are supposedly, let's say, doomed. But again, these are two extremes. And what we have actually today in terms of cyborg technology and its consumption is much more fluid and complex than these two extremes, post-human perspective and the transhuman perspective as the extreme. And one theoretical implication of this, let's say embryonic research, relates to technology consumption studies directly, which so far are essentially about what consumers can or cannot do with technology. But when technology changes our ontological framing of ourselves as human beings, we must change our view of technology as well. And here I am quoting Neil Harbinson, a fellow cyborg who has an antenna implanted right here in his head that allows him to listen to colors. He says that cyborgs don't use technology, cyborgs are technology. And once again, here in the chat, I'm gonna share another link. There you go. Here you can find his TED Talk in which he explains the whole antenna thing, how can listen to colors and how this thing works. And well, I can say that our findings so far, they sort of challenge prior consumer research and theory in which these technologies, they are portrayed as purely an instrumental means to an end. And somehow this new transhuman perspective opens a novel, let's say, avenue to study human technology relationships, especially human technology integrations, which is something new within marketing and consumer research. And so if you like the topic, if you are interested right now in this, Russ has a new paper on JMM. And we also have another one with Luis Pessoa coming out soon, also in JMM. In this one, we are talking about biohacking, Prometheanism, and consumer sentiments. Well, that pretty much is. That's it. Don't forget to live longer, to live long and prosper. That's it. Thanks. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Vito. This is an intriguing context where technology and human being, they fusion, they merge, and that's why it's caused a lot of surprise and discussions. So now we will start our Q&A session, and I will ask you to you can request for doing your questions while you start to write your question on the chat or requesting to participate. I would like to bring one question that Marianne mentioned, and I think it's really important when we are doing research about technology and in technological context, and how to approach this type of topic without quickly becoming obsolete. How do you understand this challenging, like Marianne mentioned, how the apps change, the products change, and the context change a lot. How do you see this? Who would like to start?
I could give my 2 cents, which is I think there's something, there will be some fundamental things which will stay. And I think it has to do more so, I think you have to look at the motivations behind that thing. For example, in the Bitcoin blockchain ecosystem, there are terms that come up like ICOs or NFTs are huge right now. And so I think sometimes it's also good to sort of let the dust settle a bit. And I think it's about identifying like what will remain at the end. Although, that's easier to say in hindsight, like hindsight is always 2020. And so I don't know if Russ has some ideas about how to deal with the obsoleteness of some of these things. Like what if Bitcoin is not around 20 years from now? So
Well, you know, this is something that museums have had a hard time with because I was in Rochester, and there's an Eastman Kodak house, and they decided a dozen years ago when I was taking a photography course there to digitize all of their thousands and thousands of photos. And they put it on these optical discs that were, you know, this big. And there used to be optical disc players that cost several hundred or several $1,000s. And that quickly became obsolete. And so they had to transfer it to another storage medium, and then another storage medium. And so how do you keep these things in technologically accessible sort of shape? And with NFTs, Nifties, those are things that are also going to become technologically obsolete, not the digital form itself, but the way that we access them. And so I don't know that anyone is worried about that yet, but I guess just in terms of the broad question, you and I, Mariam, have done research on people that are not going digital, or at least they're retrograde people that are going back to the analog days for photography and for music and film and so forth. And those are people that have not necessarily did technology, but they're finding value in the pre-technological age. God forbid it should happen, but if some hostile force decided to shut down the internet in our area for months or years, how would we get by? I think we would get by, but it would be a huge and dramatic sort of change. So I think it's easy to be stimulated to keep up with technology, but sometimes it's running in place to not really get ahead, but just keep up with what's there. Vito may have something.
Yeah, actually, that question actually, it doesn't have any correct or one size fits all answer, right? That depends on the context and the resources that you have as a researcher. Two things that I usually do, and so far, so good. One of them actually was something that Eileen Fisher mentioned during her class in 2019 when I was taking her class as a PhD student. And she said that, well, once you start collecting data about something, don't stop, keep moving. So I have an IFTTT, I'm sharing here with you in the chat. It's a service that you set several triggers to capture data, and then you have these data organized in a spreadsheet. That's my advice, or this is something that I have been doing because of the type of data that I tend to have. And the second thing might be crazy, but that's what I have. Well, for instance, it's terrible when you forget, when you lose, for instance, your token to access your Bitcoin, your cryptocurrencies. So I have all of mine here inside my body. I can lose it. It's right here. If I don't remember the number, that crazy number or that crazy phrase that I have to access my cryptocurrency, all right, I just have to tap my cell phone, and there you go. I can access them. So that might be a solution.
I also have to ask you, you have like the best slides, by the way. Like, how do you get the slides? Like, what's your secret there as well?
I'm gonna send you my setup. Don't worry. It's a setup. I can send you that.
Okay, I think you have to send to everybody, because I was talking with my students, Maribel. Look, Igor, you have to do the same your thesis, your dissertation, because it's very nice, this kind of presentation. You are very dynamic. I really like it.
Yes, thank you.
I love this, and he points to the test that in front of. It's amazing, Vito. You need to share your tricks.
I'm gonna share here in the chat. Thank you. Don't worry.
Russ mentioned in his initial speech the idea of social differences, and especially considering the economic difference and regional difference. One question is, how can we guarantee the diversity of perspectives, considering that technologies are present everywhere, but there are different uses around the world or according to different groups? How do you see this idea of technology as they are consumed and used by different groups and cultures?
Yeah, there's no easy answer to that because diversity is so diverse. What I mean is that there are so many diverse groups that getting access to one or getting one group to cooperate with us is different from another. I was co-supervising a dissertation in India. Well, actually, it was in Ireland by an Indian guy who was studying gay Irish consumers. He came to Ireland not knowing the culture, not speaking Gaelic at all. But he got, and it helped, he was studying gay middle-aged men who had not come out and had suffered under the Catholic anti-gay climate for a long time. It helped that he himself was gay. It helped that he met some of these people on Grindr and had to quickly say, well, wait a minute, I'm not interested in sex. This is about research, and be sure that that was understood from the start. But he gained access to that culture and gained really deep access, and I think has a couple, well, actually he's had a couple of CMC, consumption markets and culture papers on the topic already. But he gained really great insight into this group of people and some influences of their sexual orientation in terms of how it influenced their careers and their career choices. And being priests, for example, was one way to hide your identity because no one expected you to have a heterosexual partner and so forth. So at any rate, that's just one example, but each of the potentially diverse areas that we might study. Vito showed a cyborg woman with one cyborg arm. How do you gain access to the Oscar Pistoriuses who have carbon fiber feet, for example? They say that the real test of cyborg technology will be when you're willing to cut off a limb in order to have a prosthesis attached because it's superior in terms of technology. But to gain access to such people, it's a challenge every time. Mariam faced the challenge of getting billionaires to talk to her in Bitcoin environments. And so each particular niche is a challenge. And Vitor the same way in trying to gain access to grinders of a different sort, the type that are technological grinding. So you guys may have some other inputs here.
I would say, I think the one way in which you can ensure diversity, at least in my context, has been that I attend a lot of different, the way that you do it is you're not just like focused on one space, right? Like I would say when I started researching Bitcoin, like the media that I was reading, like news media was very negative. It was like, you had this sort of impression of drugs, illicit trade, all of these things. But then when I went to a meetup event, it was a completely different sort of impression that I had of the community. And so one way to triangulate, and now the good thing is with a lot of these different platforms, we can study, like, Reddit is a beautiful place for a lot of these discussions because people are their identities are sort of removed from their real lives. And so they're more open about, talking about what their actual views are. And so Reddit is a great source. And then you've got like other platforms as well. So I would say triangulation, doing in-person, I think in-person ethnographic work is very it's important. And I hope that after COVID is done, that we can go back into like the real field as well, because I think being on the ground gives you a completely different perspective and it allows you to have that kind of diversity in your data as well.
Well, in my case, actually, I had some issues trying to get access to some communities, especially because some of these cyborgs and transhumanists, I'm quoting here one of them, we don't want to be treated like rabbits. I mean, red labs. I'm sorry, red labs. You know, they don't like that, and it's fair, right? Though that's fair. So I remember that my first approach was as a researcher, and everyone was like, all right, all right, all right. I am not your red lab. I was all right, I got it. And then by the time I was kind of wasn't. I started I started receiving some invitations to public and closed and secret groups and secret meetings in person, online. And right after my implantation of these microchip, I was invited and accepted in an online community, secret community, just for developers and beta users of these type of technologies. And one thing that is remarkable in terms of social acceptance is the passage of a movie called Freaks. I'm not sure if you remember. Gobbo gobble, one of us, one of us. So every time one person or one cyborg is accepted into their community, they cheer somehow. They welcome this person by saying that. So I got mine. One of us, gobbo gobble. So that was, you know, the apex or the mark of my acceptance into this community. So, and today I have a couple of friends within the transhumanist community, cyborg community, and so on and so forth. So this is something that you have to invest, not only your time, but your passion, your interest. And one thing that both Luis and Russ, they say actually that they keep saying that to me every time that I have any kind of doubt or question. Follow your passion. So I do like what I do. I do like technology. I do like the topic. So anytime that I have any kind of conversation with a colleague, with a cyborg fellow or a transhumanist, I'm not faking it. I truly understand that I am one of us. So that's something that is interesting.
My colleague Paula Chimenti suggested one question that I guess Russ and Vito can help us. Thank you for the amazing talks and the opportunity to hear you talk about amazing topics. One curiosity that I have is how cyborgs and biotech might change Belk's concept of the extended self, because they are part of us inside our bodies. So,
Russ, spoiler alert.
Yes. Well, Vito and I are working on a paper that is looking at, it starts with a science fiction premise of someone who, without going into the details, has himself in effect cloned. And his clone is the one that gets to live on Earth and get all of this man's wealth, while the real person who is potentially dying of sort of a brain embolism has to go to the far side of the moon to a beautiful retirement community. And to cut to the chase, he marries another woman who's gone through the same procedure, and she's chosen her 20-something-year-old self. He's chosen his 40-something-year-old self. They get married. They go back to her place in Detroit. They'd met in Toronto. And at that point, her clone, her original rather, on the far side of the moon dies. And her organic son sues her estate to get all of the estate money, because after all, the real woman has died on the far side of the moon. And so it gets into a court trial that tries to establish whether this clone, whether this cyborg, or actually a robot with an uploaded mind, is the real person, or whether this is a fake. This is simply a pale imitation that has no right to this woman's money. And the philosophical arguments about who is the real self in this case get to some very interesting and deep questions, and we're still probing some of the ramifications of that. And so I think, yes, there are some serious challenges to the notion of extended self. if you were to able to, and this isn't necessarily all of technology, but if you were able to duplicate yourself or upload your mind or create a robot that had your mind put into it, would that robot be you, or would you be you, or would both of you be you? And so what do you do in those circumstances? Is this simply a part of your extended self, or is this another self? At one point in time, if there's a brain transfer, they're the same, but then they go off and lead separate lives and sort of become different people. How does that work? I guess it's like twins in that case. Start out monozygotic twins as similar. But Vito may have other insights.
Yeah, no. Well, I have to agree, right? We are right in the paper. Yeah. Well, in terms of, well, another perspective here, my doctoral dissertation, I proposed an alternative to the extended self that is, well, so far has been called the interactive self. And because of the extended self is based on Sartre's mode of being, of having things to inform your identity. In my case, in the case of cyborgs, the interactive self is not based on having possessions, but having possessions and doing things with these possessions. So there's no point, for instance, in having a microchip and not doing anything with this microchip, which is, for instance, exchanging data with another digital device. So there is this second proposition in terms of self-extension or another type of self. And both papers are working papers, and hopefully they are submitted late this year, hopefully.
Yeah, there's a similar sort of thing with collectors. If you collect something, no matter what it might be, like that beautiful little statue behind you, Maribel, unless that is fake. No, that's your real patio. And so if you're continuing to collect these little statuettes, you are a collector. But suppose you've said, that's it, no more of these things, my collection is complete. At that point, you're no longer a collector, you're a curator of that collection. And so I think this goes along with Vito's notion that it's continuing in exercising this activity that defines who you are. So it's not the things that define you, it's the activity of collecting. And so in this case, with Vito's dissertation, it's the act of doing things with these chips or other digital technologies.
Thank you, Emilio. Emilio wants to bring a question.
Hi. For all of you, I'd like to share something, ask what they think about the future of some kind of research questions, the research about this usage of technology. And for the last 20 years, in the past, we have been research a lot of psychological choice concerning preference and usage concerning technology. So you haven't seen most of research and preference for consumers related to the kind of category of the product or service, like the hedonism, the utilitarianism. And we have been seeing in the last years how much these social interaction have been included, like the social influence, prestige, status, conspicuity, materialism, but for something that is not material anymore. And the kind of the new real now is virtual. So I think we have some good and bad things. So how to define what is interesting in this moment and how we can decide the perfect direction to do a kind of just ethical, but related to construct the academy with our research, because I think that we are crossing some boundaries and we have to impose some limits for some details, because it's a kind of, I want to be up to date all the time, doesn't matter what it's around me. So we have some kind of individualism, so kind of selfish about people, and we are not living anymore the real things. Oh, what is real now? It's a kind of mix. So I'd like to hear from you what you think about that. Thank you.
Well, I can answer if no one else is going to, but yeah, I guess, you know, I'm very old. And so I go back to when I was doing my dissertation typing on a typewriter, if you remember those, and using whiteout fluid and various films to make corrections and having carbon copies. We have CC on our memos, but no one remembers that that was once a carbon copy on a typewriter. And so things have indeed become more virtual. Thank God for word processors and the ability to now do internet searches and all of these sorts of things. Does it make it any less real that you don't go to a library and go to the card catalog any longer? Does it make it any less real that you don't have books on your shelf anymore, but you have books in your computer? That last one has taken me a while to get to. That I've got this whole library. This is not my real room. I've got this whole library of books behind me, and it was hard to give that up because I knew that it was the red book on the shelf over here, and that I had detailed marginal notes and so forth. But now it's another way of accessing knowledge. And because it's ephemeral, if you will, because it's digital, it also means it's searchable. And it's searchable in terms of metadata. And so we don't have to remember that it's in the red book on this shelf. We can do a search and find it instantly. We no longer have our music collection on shelves behind us. We no longer have our book collections. We no longer have our film collections. But all of that is accessible virtually instantly or streamable. And so I think it's a wonderful change in technology. It just takes a little bit getting used to, especially for old fogies like me that have been around a long time and gone through lots of iteration of these changes. So let some of the younger folks here, Vito or Mariam, speak to the question.
So I would have a just your point about like, since everything is digital and like, how do we even define what's real and what's constructive? Like one of the things that it made me think of was how, you know, sometimes I think like even with people that I have been studying in the Bitcoin community, they sort of feel this sort of loss of community, like this sense of distance almost, especially since a lot of people now who are coming into the space are coming in because they want to make money. And so they sort of feel disenchanted a little bit. And like even my own feelings about the context have sort of evolved in that sort of state where it's like, I think Bitcoin was initially something that was bringing people together, you know, it was community, it was sort of like this thing that brought people together and it made for authentic connections back then. And maybe that is sort of eroding a little bit because, you know, everything sort of moves towards neoliberalization where everybody's about the individual and everybody's trying to, you know, sort of look out for themselves. And so I think that is one thing as we study these contexts. I think in general, I think there is a desire for a lot of us, especially after COVID, is that we want spaces where people can actually connect, where we want there to be less, like, you know, even like a lot of influencers these days, they're also sort of saying, hey, you know what, maybe we need to step back and maybe everything is not just about building your own brand, it's about connecting. And that's one of the reasons why, like, I was just thinking about like how one of the reasons why Clubhouse, for instance, has become this space where people are sort of gravitating towards, because it allows people to not be performing all the time. And this is one of the things that I am coming across in the digital detoxing project that I'm working on. It's basically people are searching for these spaces where they don't have to perform, where they don't have to, you know, sort of show their status and stuff. And so they're basically looking for a genuine, authentic connection, and they're looking out for spaces that are allowing them to find those connections with other people. So that would be my take on it, I think.
Well, my take on it, Eminem, the rapper, the singer rapper, he has a nice song, at least for me, it is one of my favorite songs, actually. Lose Yourself is the name of his song. And basically the idea is that you have to lose yourself to find yourself. So I don't see that, once again, there's one size fits all in terms of I'm gonna work here, this way, that way. Well, why don't give it a try to, you know, another thing, another context. The more diverse, the more plurality, perhaps the better. So open your heart, open your mind, and try something new. Perhaps you may be amazed by the things that you may discover there. So that would be my take. Lose yourself, and then perhaps you may find yourself. And listen to Eminem.
Professor Farias, Salomão Farias, added something about ethics. I mean, technology always encompasses this different realm of our life, like doing family, spirituality, and also sexuality. And then Professor Farias asked, I'm curious about ethics in this topic. There is a meeting called RoboSex, if I'm not mistaken, a lucrative industry in Japan for cyborg sex, cyborg dolls for sex. So to discuss a bit, Salomon, I don't know if you want to add something, but the idea is to discuss ethics related to this sexual sphere. Is that what you?
I can comment a bit because I have 2 papers under review on sex robots, and one of the things that that drives sex robot purchases and sex robot patronage in sex robot brothels is sex. Obviously, that's part of the idea, that people are enjoying themselves, and this is sort of males and females, I should add, and that's sort of an extension of we got comfortable. I think women first with sex toys, and that and pornography, and those are things that we don't bat an eye at much any longer, especially in the West. But in loosening up those ideas, it also causes us to question what is these machines can do for us. And the answer to that is not a simple one. Theoretically, sex robots can monitor our breathing, our heartbeat, our blood pressure, our perspiration, any number of things. And there are devices where they can find out what gives you orgasms and recreate that experience. And through pulsing and expanding and contracting and vibrating and so forth, these things theoretically could bring us more pleasure than human beings. And if that gets to be the case, coupled with a number of other things like rising divorce rates and sort of dissolution of the family and so forth, we could see new forms of family with partners, without partners, going solo. We have reproductive technologies and sexual aids so that we don't need partners in quite the same way we did when we were all working back on the farm and needed lots of children to help out on the farm, or even in the factories, which were initially staffed by women and children before men got into the factories. And so it raises a lot of interesting questions, but just to leave you with one finding, because it's easier to study sex robot owners than it is sex robot brothel patrons, even though there are more of the brothel patrons than the owners, because these things cost from like $1,500 US to well over $20,000 US, is that the owners, well, they have harems sometimes of multiple sex robots. And even if they just have one, even then it's not all about sex. They take photos of themselves with their sex robots and they post them online. But to do that, they have to learn to do makeup and to do hairstyles and to buy wardrobes and to pose these things and to lift them and carry them around. And in effect, they become the servants to their sex robots. And they also sort of do a gender swap if these are males with female robots, and that they're the caregivers in this case. And they're the ones that are preening and taking care of this robot. And so when they say it's not all about sex, it really is not all about sex. That may be what got the foot in the door, whatever appendage it was, and got them interested in this thing in the first place. but there's more to it than that. And there's some evidence that even with sex brothel patrons, sex robot brothel patrons, that there's somewhat more to it than just the sex itself. Some of you maybe heard of GFE, the girlfriend experience, where with a human sex worker, you would pay extra in order to be treated like a boyfriend, which means that you had to seduce and buy gifts for and please the woman and give her sexual pleasure rather than just treat her as a thing. And so this gets back to Vito was talking about her. One of the questions that Maribel fielded, is this a thing or a person? And we can, not only anthropomorphize sex robots, but to the degree that they can become not just replicating a semblance of feeling, but actually feeling, which is a big jump, I grant you. They could perhaps be given personhood in the same way that a corporation or a municipality or a nation is given legal personhood. It's not a human, but nevertheless, it's treated as a person that has rights and responsibilities. So I'm sorry I got off there because, as I say, I'm doing some research in this area, but perhaps the others have something to say.
That's interesting because we see a lot of people that are becoming like robots. And maybe some robots can be better than us. Depending on the person, it's better a company. So I don't know if you would like to add something to this discussion about.
I don't know much about sex robots, so not yet.
That sounds like a line where you follow up, but I know what I like.
Well, in my case, actually, I have a working paper in which I'm collecting data and analyzing sexual relationships between users of Replica and the way they create their perfect partner within this Replica app. I'm not sure if you guys know Replica, but they seems to have way more intense and deeper and sometimes extreme forms of social sexual relationships with these avatars, with these replicas, than their real life biological material partners, right? So there is a whole community they are living these kind of, sexual relationships, these love relationships. So this paper probably will be out. I'm gonna submit it actually early 2022. So that's something that might touch a little bit on that topic. And if you don't know what a replica is, probably you have watched the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. That is a sort of replica. And yeah, science fiction going to becoming science fact, although it may sound crazy, but yes, that's true.
And that's replica with a K rather than a C. And it also ties into sex robots because some people are getting sex dolls rather than sex robots and are using replica interactions to put a voice, a cheap voice, onto their sex doll and make it into a part of a sex robot.
I will add one thing. So I have to practice French. And so I was watching a French TV show called Osmosis, which sort of has this, like the theme of the show is that there's like this AI that decides who you're going to love. And so a lot of people are sort of turning towards, you don't need like a physical sex robot, really. You can just be in a virtual reality, and that's where your perfect partner can exist. And so it's like, it's just like on virtual reality, and that's where you find love, basically. Like your avatar exists in a non-physical form. So I would recommend the show. Although it wasn't very good. Sorry.
I'm gonna post something here in the chat. It is about Samantha. Samantha is one of the most advanced sexual robots that we have on the market these days. She can say no in the case of a rape, for instance, or any kind of aggression. That's quite a jump.
Interesting. So Raul, with a comment and a question. Hello, first of all. Love the talk on cyborgs and technology, especially it being something that we will be living the next couple of years. We can also see this coming up in video games and pop culture. For example, with the release of Cyberpunk, 277 million of people have begun to think how they would like live as cyborgs and augmenting their bodies. Do you think that we as race are ready to have this much technology at the palm of our hands?
Can I go first? So the first thing, Ro, did you buy Cyberpunk to? Did you buy the game? I hope you haven't, because that's not a good game, actually. Too much expectation for, that's not a good game. But in any way, enjoy if it is the case. And I don't believe that humanity is prepared to any kind of this stuff, especially when it comes to well, here in Canada, we have a culture that may or may not be more open to this type of cyborgization and human enhancement technologies. Here in Canada, there is this call for research from the government in terms of the impacts that human enhancement technologies may bring to humanity, but there's nothing like that in Brazil, for instance. And the same call for research and the same interest, it also happens to have in Europe. So that really depends on the type of culture in the markets that you are trying to understand. But anyway, in Brazil today, I had to prove once again that I was not a devil by holding my rosary. So that might be an answer.
Think about this idea of how ready we are for technology. One thing that I keep wondering is that, and I also would like to address your Marianne's and Russ paper on artificial life, and that's an interesting work where you present the cultural myth like Pygmalion, the Golem, Frankenstein, and Metropolis. And I was wondering if we if you will update or renew our myths, considering the new experience that technology is presenting. Like, because we are changing the way we live, the way we deal with death, the way we do family religiosity. Do you think we'll be able to renew our mythology based on this new experience technology provides to us?
Absolutely. That's what science fiction is all about, or a large part of science fiction is creating new myths. So technology is, in a sense, our source of contemporary mythology. That and branding and some other marketing phenomena, they get tied in here as well. Let me just, I have more to say, but let me stop it there because I hate to hog the time. Mariam, Vito may have something to say.
I would say I totally agree with Russ on that front about how I think science fiction, like, we're also seeing a lot more of rapture ideology that's also coming in, like, especially with COVID, especially with all the things that have happened with Trump's election as well. We're sort of there seems to be that sort of need to find meaning in a lot of these things. And so technology is providing those meanings. It's sort of allowing people to have somewhat secular religions almost, and it is giving their lives a sense of purpose as well. Like, when I speak to people who are, building in the Bitcoin space, they seem to imagine this different world where technology is going to save humanity, and they're going to go and live in these citadels, which is sort of like, in some ways they are drawing on religious tropes which are very old. It's apocalyptic thinking and stuff, but then again it constantly gets refurbished as well. Like, all of these old myths, they keep on getting refurbished and they become new again. And so there's a lot of rapture ideology that's also operating in the space, I would say. And it just, it addresses the uncertainty that we're living through. So yeah, so that would be my.
Oh, that's nice. I've just shared here in the chat, Russ, work on speculative fiction and transhumanism in the Journal of Marketing Management. So just click on it and have a look at his latest paper. It's really, really nice. And in terms of the future here, yeah, I agree with both actually, in terms of myth and this new readings that we may have about them. And if you our forthcoming paper on JMM addresses a little bit about transhumanism, addresses just a little bit about Prometheanism, in the way the Promethean shame, which is something very, very interesting. It's a concept very, very interesting. It basically says that every time that we are confronted by our machines, we remember our faulty condition as human beings, which takes us back to Prometheus as a myth. So right now, because of transhumanism and the possibility of becoming more than humans, we may have to reread or rethink about the Prometheus myth as a whole. So yeah, we are going to have these several rereadings of these myths for sure.
I will ask final questions. I don't know if Luiz Alexandre Pessoa and said, I'd like to ask a question and a provocation from the perspective of marketplace exclusion. And I guess this question, it will be quite important for us, Brazilian researchers. In countries with great social inequalities, such as Brazil, is technology convenient to be exclusionary?
Well, Vito
sorry to ask these guys. I'm sorry, but I really believe this is an important question, thinking about Brazil, and not only Brazil, but all the southern countries that are really marked by these inequalities. But I don't expect an objective reply, okay? It's just a provocation, something for us to think about technology in our societies.
All right, just to give you an idea here, just because you are my PhD advisor and you're provoking us, that's fine. Well, just to have an idea, if you want to go under a procedure, if you want to have like a cryonics procedure, which means that you want to have your body frozen to be supposedly resurrect in the future, supposedly, this is a huge speculation, you're going to pay it around $200,000 to have your body frozen in a cryogenics way. So who can afford such a procedure? Like $200,000, we're talking about 1 million reais. That's insane. So I understand that one challenge that policymakers have these days is to secure fair and equal access to these technologies because of these social gap that we have back in Brazil. But we also have here in Canada, we have in the US. But once again, this is so new that there is no one single ethical or moral or anything like that framework to help us answering these questions. To be honest, there is the first ethical framework to research, develop, and somehow commercialize human enhancement technology that is a product of a research project called Sienna Project in the Netherlands. This is the first one. 2020, it was their deliverable. So there's no answer yet for that. But I understand that we may have to think about equality, fairness in the access of these technologies for sure.
I would just add on, I don't know who had this code. I think Russ would probably know, like the future is here, but it's unevenly distributed. And so I think that is one of the things that, like I come from Pakistan, which is a developing country. And I know that like people for example, here people seem to know about Bitcoin, but back home, like, except for when it comes into like a hype cycle, they don't even know that it exists. And there are people who are completely oblivious to these technologies as well. And they have no conception of like how the world is changing and how it's going to impact them in the end, and how many people might be left out of, being able to benefit from these things. And so that is something, it's a huge issue, I would say, and there aren't really very good answers available right now. Yeah, Russ.
No, I don't want to sound like a Pollyanna here who sees everything as being wonderful, but it used to be that I lived for a year in Zimbabwe in 1999, and to buy a cell phone, not a smartphone, just a cell phone at that time, cost about $450 US. I know because I had to buy one to get telephone access. So that was obviously far out of reach for everyday Zimbabweans. On the other hand, there's a wonderful study in India called A Village Goes Mobile. And it's about the fact that smartphones from China now cost the equivalent of about $5. And furthermore, they're accessible in villages that don't have electricity, or that electricity and television and the smartphone and the internet all came at once. And so, that's one innovation where, because everyone wanted to have it, the cost got driven down considerably. Now, Vito is right that some of these are incredibly expensive technologies. Elon Musk's Neuralink Corporation is sending probes into people's brains and presumably trying to create a link where his line is, and this is an Elon Musk line, so take it with a big grain of salt, that this will be a very expensive procedure, but you'll be able to get a loan for it because you'll become super smart and you'll earn money instantly and be able to pay back any sort of loan, no matter how outrageous it might be. I don't think that's realistic. In Canada, they've talked about giving people rights to some of these technologies so that it's not something that only the rich have. So I'm just giving you a few little spots of encouragement, as well as the tremendous problem of the world's poor, which has always been with us and presumably always will be, and there will be advantages for the rich relative to the poor. So you're quite right that this is an insurmountable problem, perhaps, and one that we do need to try to address.
And I almost wonder if, I keep on coming across these, and everyone is coming across these ideas about universal basic income that everyone in the world should have. And it's not just like the West, it's like everywhere in the world. There should be like a leveling playing field of like, how do you sort of lift people out of poverty? And like that idea is appealing, but I don't know if that's misguided, or I don't know. For me, it sounds appealing if we could get everybody at a certain level.
That's a great point. Yes, I agree with you. It would be a great starting point for sure. For sure.
Thank you.
Canada
Thank you,
has
guys.
sort of done that. Under COVID, Canada has sort of done that.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time. It was a great discussion. Wonderful to have you here, to see you again. I hope you can do it next time.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, and thank
Many
my
thanks.
fellow panelists.
Yes, thank you so much
And
for
Maribel.
everything.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we'll have a meeting in 50 minutes, isn't it, Emilio?
Yeah, in 10
Wanna say
minutes
something?
you
10
have a
minutes.
meeting. So I'd like to thank you from the marketing division from PADI, Professor Maribel, that organized this session here. And you three, Vitor, Marianne, and Professor Russo Bell, you were great. I think we had 109 people connected just in the Zoom link, but we have also the YouTube connected. So I will see later how many people. So I think it was really good. I like it very much, and I appreciate for your participation. And I hope to see you again in new discussions and other things we can do together. Thank you very much. Thank you, Maribel.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you soon.
Me too.
See you soon, Maribel.
Thank you.
See you guys. Take care. Stay home. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Take your vaccine.
Wow.
You're not gonna turn into an alligator.
Or a cyborg.